In progress. Okay, so this is the raglan coat class. I'm Kenneth D. King, as you probably all know. And so how a little kind of word on how I run the class. It's a combination of prepared video and live interaction. And so I have the two videos I have for tonight are kind of introducing you to the coat and introducing you to the pattern. And so what I like to do, because I'm going to do like a full screen share, and so I turn off the little thing with all the little the pictures. So if you have a question, just shout it out, because then I can always stop the video, run it back, answer the question. And so I encourage you, any questions you have, please ask, because that is why we're here. So I sent you all kind of the lesson plans, and so the thing to know, because I have a couple of people in my Guipure lace jacket class on Saturday who are kind of freaking out because they think, oh my God, I'm not going to get this done in this 8 weeks. Understand that all of these videos, because see, you'll get, after tonight, you'll get the link for the Zoom class video, and you'll get the links for the two first videos I played that are in the Zoom class. So you don't have to kind of slog through the entire video if you just want to go directly to the demonstrations. So these live on an unlisted channel on YouTube. So what I would ask you, since you paid for this class, don't pass the links around. These are for you to see. And so because one of the concerns that a couple of the students in the Guipure lace jacket class were having was that, what happens after the 8 weeks? Well, what happens after the 8 weeks is that all of this lives on YouTube for as the foreseeable future. So, if you feel like you're falling behind a little bit, that's all good. I have a couple of people from my first class I ran in the spring who are just now getting the buttonholes in their coats. So if you don't get it done, like when, if you're not tracking all the way with me, what I would say is don't make yourself crazy over it, because this is supposed to be an enjoyable experience and as well as a learning experience. So, understand that these videos will be up for as long as I can. I can't predict when I would take them down. If YouTube starts taking things down, okay, but I don't plan on going back and taking them down in the long run. Okay, so any questions before we get started?
Yes, I have one. I just noticed that, is it Rylas Bodge?
Yeah, Rylas.
Yeah, so I bought the raglan jacket pattern, I don't know, when I did the invisible pockets class, and so that was some time ago, and I'm just wondering, is that pattern now out of date? Because she mentioned that now it has colors, and I thought perhaps there had been other changes. That's what it's a small. So
Rylas, tell her kind of what you've been doing with this coat pattern.
So I sent the coat pattern to a pattern maker, and I asked her to increase the sizes because I had some students that needed some larger sizes. And then she offered to put the different sizes in color. So we're in the process of working with that right now. Do you know if it's gotten any farther, Kenneth?
I just sent her back the review pieces to probably yesterday or the day before, because there are some little kinks in the pattern that she wanted to tidy up, and so she sent me a review copy. So I went in and did the markups on the different pieces. So,
but it's basically the same pattern. It is the same pattern.
all right, great.
Tried and true, because I've made it several times, and I love it.
Two of them in the back. Are those two of yours in the back?
Yeah, those are two of them.
See, there we are.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Okay, so other questions? Don't be shy. Yes, Faye.
Yes, I had to add some extra fabric because of the way I'm shaped.
Okay.
Around the waist and the hips.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it came down, instead of being straight, I have kind of like a flare at the bottom.
Yeah.
Because I took it and I slid it like a quarter of an inch from the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down.
Yeah.
So give it a new grain line.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, but now I have a flare at the bottom. Is that?
Well, the coat has a natural flare to begin with.
Oh,
now, what
okay.
you can do is you can actually, if you want to, you can bring it in a little bit if you feel like the flare is too much for you.
Okay.
And so also this is actually kind of leads me into the office hour. You all get an office hour. So what I like to do is I like to see the muslins, because I mean, there's nothing more dispiriting than like making something that doesn't fit. And so I really want to, cast my eye over the muslins and have a look at things and help you in any way that you need to adjust. So what I would ask for you to do is, email me and we can start scheduling the office hours. If you feel like you're kind of on solid ground with the fitting, you could save the office hour for construction if you wish, but that is included in the class. Okay. Yeah. So Denise.
Hi, I just wanted to find out a little bit about ease because I'm small, if I don't, and I know a lot of these coats, they run big, and I'm going to look like a walking mushroom if I if I go straight. So I just want to get an idea of how much ease. I just got the measurements
Mhm.
for the sizes a few days ago.
Yeah.
But there was no, I don't know, like if there's 4 or 6 inches of ease, I might want to take it down a size.
Well, the assumption that I make with this coat is that it has 6 inches of ease, because that's sort of a coat. But see, since this is your pattern and you want to scale it to your size, if you want to go down a size to take it a little less wearing ease so that it gives you a better line, you can actually absolutely do that. Okay. Okay. So other question? Yeah. So Yolanda.
Hi, hi Kenneth. You mentioned that you sent something on email regarding like syllabus for the class or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I didn't.
It was kind of a long email. So when people signed up, I sent. It was like the materials list, and if you kept reading down the materials list, it was sort of, and it's a rough outline. I may move things around a little bit, but it's just a good kind of guide to let you know, okay, this is kind of how the class is going. But it was a kind of a long email, and I know I glaze over after long emails too. So don't it's what we do. It's yes. Okay.
And will you be covering the different sizes on the pattern so that I know which line should I be following? And
yeah, because see where we're going with this. The first little video is, this is what we're making. This is the coat. This is what it looks like, that sort of thing. And then the next thing is the pattern, because what I did with this coat, because I have made so many of these that I just am giving them away now. And I had a friend who, I called her and I said, would you like a coat? And she said, yeah. So I said, okay, I need these measurements. And so she gave me the measurements. And then, so what I'm showing is how, here's the pattern, here's the different pieces. This is how I adjusted for her particular figure. Okay. And I also have a video on, because I just think it's useful to know, drafting linings and facings and all of that is formula. Once you get the body fitted correctly, and there are times, I mean, it's a fairly straightforward coat, but for some people, if you feel like you've done way too much alteration on the coat, you don't have to also work back and alter the lining pieces, the facing pieces, and all of that. That particular video shows how you could just take your main body pieces and generate new lining pieces. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So
may I ask you just a question? Sure. Also?
Yes.
Selecting a size for the muslin, I'm exactly between an 8 and a 10.
Go with the 10.
Go with the 10. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
You can always take a little wearing ease out. And this coat is fairly easy to get rid of the wearing ease.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So other questions?
I have one more question.
Yes.
Kenneth, you said that a coat has 6 inches ease.
Yes.
Is that from, I don't know if it pertains to this class, from a sloper, from a moulage to a sloper to a dress sloper to a coat, right?
Yeah, well, if you measured your actual measurements, it would be 6 inches added to your measurements. It's not 6 inches added to the sloper, because the sloper.
No, but altogether, that's altogether.
Yeah.
Sides and backs and fronts and so on. But basically, it's usually 6 inches.
Generally, yes.
Okay, it's not just
But-
pertains to this style. Okay,
Right. That's kind of a general rule.
okay,
Because with wearing ease, generally, like the minimum wearing ease that I learned was 2 inches, bust, waist, hips, 1.5 inches in the armhole. And then if you went to like a jacket, you would add 2 more inches wearing ease. If you used an overcoat, you would add 2 more inches wearing ease. That's kind of the general
okay,
customary wearing ease for pattern making.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so other questions? It's so good to see a gentleman in the class. Hello, sir. He's going to be making the same coat because I will confess, I made this coat first for me. So, ladies, you know, it fits you too. Because you see, one of the things I learned, you know, at FIT, because at FIT, I was, I call them the tailoring mafia. It's all these very old Italian guys who are serious business. And for the longest time, they sort of held me at arm's length. They were always very nice, but I understood it was you may not approach. And when they finally decided I was okay, which took a little while, then now we're pals. And I remember one of them was saying to me, he said, "You never make a sample. You always make it for someone." He said, the ladies in my family all have this coat. The men in my family all have this jacket. You know, he said, make it for yourself. And so that's what I did with this coat is I made it for me. So there you have it. So other questions before we begin?
Would you
Kenneth,
give us the changes you made to the coat
What
for
was that?
yourself? Not now, but as you go through the pattern?
Okay, I didn't understand the question.
The modifications you made from this coat to fit you
Yes, that's going to be
as we discuss the pattern.
yeah, that's going to be in the section on how I modified the pattern for this particular person. You'll get a sense of what the process is for that. Okay. And then
Okay.
we also have the office hour. You and I can talk in the office hour to figure out what modifications you would need.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and there was another question. Yeah. So
Kenneth, will you be talking about fabric selection, some pros and cons in your discussion?
well, I'm going to show you the fabrics I use. What I would recommend as a first go, and I tell my students this because this coat really was for a class at FIT originally. That's the first time I made it. I recommend a tweed or something with a bit of texture, something a little more forgiving. If you're in a climate where it's warmer, something like a silk tweed or a silk voile or something that would not be quite so heavy would work well. Something that's forgiving for a first go. That's what I would recommend. And you'll get to see what I've made this coat out of.
Okay,
It'll give
Great.
you a better idea.
great. Thank you.
Okay, so any others? Okay, then, so we shall begin. So I will share the screen and I always like to ask, can you see it? Can you hear it? And so when I ask that, just someone pipe up and say, yes, I can. And here we are. And so I will collapse this down and put this over here. And welcome to the raglan coat class. So can everyone hear that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, we're off and running. This is an example of the coat that we are going to be constructing in this class. This one is a salt and pepper tweed. It's a lightweight tweed, but quite nice. So I want to show you first some details. This, of course, is the front of the coat. I've added some extra buttons here because I felt it needed it for my particular purposes. You can see the detailing, like the close-up here we have of the collar. I have used saddle stitching as my top stitching on the collar, on the facing edge, and also on the raglan seams. This is a detail of the cuff latch and the welt pocket. What is that thing on the sleeve? And the official term is cuff latch. Now on the back of the jacket, as you can see, there is a center back seam. It's fairly loosely fitted. It has a bit of a flare to it. But the shoulder, as you can see here, the shoulder is the raglan shoulder. You can see the back of the collar, and you can see the saddle stitching on the raglan seams and on the center back. There is a little bit of a shoulder pad in here. I feel that any kind of raglan or kimono sleeve needs at least a little shoulder pad. And now I'm going to show you some video of the coat laid flat out on the table. Now that we have the coat flat on the table, I just wanted to show you a few of the details. One of the details is the cuff latch. And as you can see here, I used a saddle stitch for top stitching, for really all of the top stitching on this coat. Another detail is the single welt pocket. Again, saddle stitching on the welt, looking up at the collar. You can see here, saddle stitching yet again for the collar and for the sleeve. Now you notice here that I put more buttons on rather than just the buttons indicated in the pattern. I decided that I liked more buttons rather than fewer. So when we open the coat up, you can see it's fully lined. You can see the lining here has back pleat. Also, down here, this is the join with the hem. And as you can see, this is a jump pleat. There's a jump pleat also on the sleeve. So let me turn this over and you get to see the back. So here it is from the back. And you can see here, it has center back seam. Again, center back seam and the raglan seams are stitched with a saddle stitch. And you can see here, the cuff latch is lined with the same fabric as in the lining. And then you can see here, there is the lining sewn into the cuff on the sleeve. So I think it's just good to see the coat so you know really what we're going to be making. This is an introduction to tailoring. So there are some tailoring techniques here, but this is not heavy duty bulletproof tailoring. Here is the coat flat on the table. And you can see some details like the pocket, the fronts, the collar, and the cuff latches. It's also lined in a rather nice paisley. So yes, this is the coat we're going to be making in this class. This is the front view of the coat we will be constructing in this class. It's just good to get a good look at it. So the details here. You have the welt pockets. You also have a cuff latch. I will talk about different methods of top stitching and bound buttonholes if you so choose, and how to construct the collar. So again, this is the front view. And I will turn her around so you get a good look at the back as well. And here she is from the back. You can see You can see better the raglan seams as well as the center back seam and the collar. So yes, this is the coat we will be constructing in this class. Aside from the pattern, you want your main fabric for the coat and the lining. So let me talk about what I'm using for my particular example. This is, as you can see, it's a wool and lurex boucle. It's going to turn into a nice little kind of cocktail evening coat for a friend of mine because I needed someone to make this for. And then we have the lining. This is a fairly, it's not too heavy, but it's a nice drapey damask. I like damasks. I like jacquards. I like bridal satin. I like something that has a little more heft to it. I hate Bemberg. So what I would say is use something with a little more heft to it. It will actually last longer and feel better when you're wearing it. So these are the two main fabrics. I bought 3.5 yards of this and 3 yards of this, and I will have a little bit extra when this is done. Next, other materials. These are the other materials that we're going to be using to make this coat. So first off, raglan shoulder pads. This is, as you can see, it's a polyester pad. It has a bit of a shoulder shape. It is not terribly thick. This is probably about 3/4 of an inch thick. You can get some that are a little thinner. You can get some that are a little thicker. But you want a raglan shoulder pad as opposed to a set-in. It has a completely different look. And also some fusible pellon. This is just garden variety pellon. Anything you have will do. If you even have some fusible tricot, that would work. We don't need a bunch of this. We just need about like 3/8 of a yard. I'm going to use this to interface setting in the pockets. So yeah, anything that you have around your studio will work just fine. Next, tailoring canvas. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. This is the one that I just happen to have. There are some that don't have the stripes. There are some that are, they're a little more beige. They're a little lighter in color. We don't really need anything too bulletproof. This is going to be what we use to stiffen out the collar. We're going to use this in connection with muslin. And so this is just shirtweight muslin. This is, I think they call this a number 3. That's called sewing muslin. Something thin, something inexpensive. Don't break the bank for this. Got a 1/2 yard of this. And then finally, you're going to be using silk organza. And 1/4 of a yard of this is plenty. I like silk organza because it doesn't have too much shine. It's easy to press. And we're going to be using this when we make the welt for the welt pocket. So here we have our different materials, fusible interfacing, and the shoulder pads. So we have the materials. Let's look at the pattern. Okay, let me just. Okay, so questions so far.
Hi, Kenneth.
Yes, hi, Libby.
Hi. I was taking some notes there. What was the amount on the tailoring canvas, the yardage?
If you just get like maybe 1/2 a yard, you just really need it for the collar, and you need it to interface the little welts.
Okay.
So you don't need a great amount of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Faye.
On the lining, you said like bridal satin?
Yeah, bridal satin, Duchess satin, you know,
Okay.
something with that kind of feel to it.
Bemberg, it will be too thin?
I hate Bemberg. Bemberg is terrible. My big beef with Bemberg, every time, and it's not been very many because I learned quickly, I can wear through a Bemberg lining in a season. And some
Mhm.
people like it because it's thin and light and all of that, but I've not had good luck with it. It's also difficult to sew. And
Okay.
and you know, because you're going to be putting some work into this coat, you want it to look well for quite a long time. So you know, Bemberg just doesn't work. Bridal satin, Duchess satin. You saw the jacquard that I used. You know, it doesn't have to be a heavy or stiff fabric. You know, use something that's kind of fun and interesting as well. You know, it
Are those
doesn't have to be
polys or
color.
silk?
What was that question?
Are the linings poly or silk?
Well, you could do silk, you could do acetate, you could do rayon. Poly gets a little hot to wear.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So okay. Other questions?
Thank you.
Would a charmeuse work?
Charmeuse, yes, if you're up to sewing it, absolutely. It feels really good. I personally, I try to stay away from those fabrics. My friend Linda Maynard is like the genius for sewing fabrics like that, but I'm not, so I kind of stay away from it. But if you can make it work, I would say Mazel Tov, go with that.
Does
Okay.
anybody have a quarter yard of organza I can buy from you? Because I don't
You
have
know-
anyone near me I can get it. And it'd be like
Actually, what you could
$25.
even do is, do you have like cotton voile or something like that?
I don't think so.
Something sheer that's a natural fiber.
Okay.
You know, that would work. Because see, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, we use that for the welt pocket. And so, you know, if you have something that you can sort of see through, you can make that work.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions?
Kenneth,
Yes.
hi, this
Hi.
is Nia.
Hi there.
Hi. I wanted to ask about the shoulder pads
Yes.
and the thickness. You
Mhm.
said you use a 3/4 inch.
Half inch, 3/4. You don't need a big one in there.
Mhm.
I just find that having that shape underneath the raglan sleeve gives it a better line. The one
Okay.
thing I would caution against is foam rubber shoulder pads. I don't know if any of you here have ever taken a foam rubber shoulder pad out of a garment that's been dry cleaned way too much. You know the absolute mess it creates. So, you know, the polyester fiber, you know, the ones that I showed or something like that, you can get them on Amazon. They're fairly commonplace.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so other questions? Okay, then. So now we're going to go to, let's see, let me just move around my things here. And oh, one moment.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, here we are. Pieces. Okay, good. So I got that one too. Okay. Working pieces. Okay, so now our next step is the pattern. You know, and so, you know, I'm going to have the pattern laid out. I'm going to show you kind of how I approached this pattern with this particular woman's set of measurements. And she was very kind to let me actually show the measurements, which I thought was very nice of her. So any other questions before we continue? We good? Okay, then. So let us continue cutting and marking. Here we are. Okay. So let me just move this over here. I'd like to introduce you to the different pattern pieces that. Okay, so can everyone can hear that? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Be working with in this class. So here are the main body pieces. So we have here is the back, coat back sleeve, the front sleeve, and the front. And then up here we have the collar. Now the seam allowances are 1/2 inch for all of this. So these are the main body pieces. Next, I will show you the facings. These are the facing pieces for the jacket. We have the front facing, we have the back neck facing, we have the under collar, We also have the cuff latch. Now this is a pocket guide. When you're cutting, you're going to be cutting the main body pieces and these 4 pieces out of the fashion fabric. This here, do not cut that out. I'm going to show you how to make the pattern for the pocket welt later. That is just a guide for the shape. So we have now all of the pieces for the fashion fabric. We will move on to the lining pieces. These are the lining pieces. So over here is the back lining. This, of course, is the sleeve, and this is the lining front. These will be cut from the lining fabric, as the name implies. And then we have one more piece, which is the pocket bag. And this is the pocket bag. You could cut this from pocketing fabric, or you could cut this from your lining. 1 piece per welt pocket. So now we have all of the pieces. Now we're going to start looking at the sizing and the client that I'm going to be making this for. Here is an amusing little illustration of the client, and she has provided her measurements for me. We have a 36-inch bust. We have 39-inch hips, and the waist length from waist to the base of her neck is 13, and her sleeve length from the base of the neck to the wrist is 28 and a half. So these are the measurements I'm going to be looking at when I'm looking at the pattern itself. So now, looking here, 36 should be a size 6. So what I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the size 6 and the size 8. If it's a coat, I would say 4 inches added to her bust to get the bust on the coat. So these are the measurements I'm going to be looking at when I adjust. Now, the waist to neck length, which is 13, she's petite, so I suspect I'm going to have to adjust for that. And so when we work on the pattern, I'm going to show you the adjustments on the body itself, and then I will make a muslin and try it on her to see if I've gotten it correct. Something to know on this particular pattern, these lines here represent the waist level. So if you want to translate this over to the front, what you would do is measure down from here and then take that measurement down to here. Now I'm going to stop here for a moment. Since Rylas is having this pattern tidied up, there will be an actual waist level marked on all the pieces. So you don't have to guess on this one. To get the front waist. So I will make that adjustment first, and then we can go from there. As you can see here, I've color coded some lines on the pattern. The orange lines are, I chose the size 8 because I feel that that reflected her particular measurements. So what I've done is I drew the waist and extended the waist over to the front. Really how you do it is you measure from your underarm down to the front and draw a line perpendicular to the grain line. So then also, if you see on, I've drawn a center front line, and if you need to find that, it is 1 3/8 inches in from the cutting line. So I have the center front drafted. So my next step will be to measure from the center front to the underarm here and add that to the underarm to the center back seam here. That will tell me what the bust circumference on the pattern is, and I can compare it to the actual measurements I'm working with. One easy way to measure so that you don't have to do any math is to start at the center front and measure to this intersection. then hold that, jump it across, and measure to the center back. So the total is 20 3/4, which would be 41 1/2 for the entire circumference on the coat. So 41 1/2 inches, which, looking back at our subject, plenty of wearing ease. It's better to have a little too much rather than too little. Now, the other thing I'm looking at here, this is just an instinct. Go ahead, a question?
Yes, this is Nia.
Hi.
On your pattern,
Uh-huh.
there's no seam allowance yet, right?
Yes, there are 1/2 inch seam allowances.
Oh, okay, in the pattern, okay.
It's included, yeah. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
I'm
I
glad
have a
you asked.
question too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were the measurements that you showed the pattern one finished or your body measurements?
You mean which, the measurements here or the measurements on the little sketch?
On the paper, the chart.
The chart. That is, I guess that's the size. You know, because see, we you know, for a 36 bust, I chose that size, and it has the wearing ease added. So if you're, you know, your measurement like a 36 bust, you would add the wearing ease.
So that chart reflects my measurements, not the finished garment measurements.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
okay, okay. Other questions?
Yes, I have one, Kenneth. This is Faye.
Hi.
Hi. Do you mind if I take a picture of this, what you're showing on the screen right now?
Sure, go ahead. Absolutely.
Okay.
We good?
Not yet. My phone's acting up.
Okay. Well, you know, also, you know, that we have a recording of this too, so you can always refer back to that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Can I ask? Can
Go
I
ahead.
ask if the measurement has the wearing ease added to it, right?
Yes, that's correct. So for a
Thank you.
36 bust, you know, it ends up being 41 1/2. So it's like 5 1/2 inches. The coat has 5 1/2 more inches. Did that answer the question? Yes?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, other questions? Okay, well, we will continue. Know her and I know her figure. This would be the pocket placement for the size 8, but it feels a little bit low. So what that tells me is that I'm going to, between the bust and the waist, I'm going to take up 3/4 of an inch length, front and back. I'm going to just draw the parallel lines and fold it out, and you will see that. So then I will make that adjustment and bring it back here. I've adjusted the front. Now I'm going to adjust the back. You want to note what you've done here, because after you try on the muslin, you need to alter the other pieces, the facing, the linings, all of that, so that everything will fit one inside the other. Now we have the length. And let me just check the hip. Her hip is 39 inches. Just to make sure that we have enough room here. Measure from there to there. Jump across. 21, 42. I'd give her a little bit across the hips because I want the same wearing ease at the bust as at the hips. Now, let me do a little explanation here. This is my calculation. We needed to add 2.5 inches total circumference. So we add 1.25 inches for the half pattern. So what I have decided to do is I've decided to add a 1/2 inch to the front and the back at the hip, and then the remainder 1/4 inch at the center back. It's better to add a little more at the sides rather than at the back, because you don't want it to stick out like a tent. Now, the other thing I've done here is I've marked out this pocket placement, because I'm going to mark that on the muslin. So when I look at the muslin on her, I can see if the pocket is the correct height or if it needs to be raised or lowered. as far as pocket placement, a good general rule, if you want to have a general rule, is that this here should be roughly 3.5 inches below the waist. That is, for a hip pocket, that is considered a comfortable placement if you need a number to hang your hat on there. So we have the body pieces altered. Next, I want to look at the sleeve. Now, measuring the sleeve length. I'm going to measure the front. It's a little easier to see. See, I made the intersection point here, so I know where the seam allowance is. And her measurement is 28.5 or 29 inches. That's the sleeve length she needs. So what I'm going to do is just start at the top and measure this all the way down. So I'm giving an 1.5 inch hem allowance here. So we have like 27 3/8, maybe 27.5 inches. So we need 2 inches on this sleeve, which is quite a lot, but she has quite long, elegant arms. So now, where you want to add this? We have a line in the back, and I have extended that line to the front. So what we can do here is we can add the sleeve length here. So 2 inches. It's a simple matter, really. Slash. Here's some paper. Everything lines up. You can extend the grain line down, add 2 inches. If I need to add more, I can. Matches like so. Once what we can do here is come back in and smooth out these lines. What you do is you split the difference. So that it makes a nice, smooth, even line. And so here we have added the length that we need. I will go off camera and adjust the front and bring it back to show you the results. And here we have our sleeve length adjusted for our client. So the next step, as you probably know, is making the muslin.
Kenneth,
Yes.
I have a question. This is Liz. What about arm circumference and those of us who are a little bit beefier there?
Well, you know what you could do is take your arm measurement, and let me just back this up a little bit so we can. Okay. If you subtract the 1/2 inch from here to here and from here to here, that line there is the bicep line. And so you would just measure that to see if it is larger than your actual bicep of your arm. And what I like about having a top seam on a raglan sleeve is if you need to add more bicep, you just bow it out here and you bow it out there to give yourself a little extra room in that bicep.
Okay.
Does that make
sounds
sense?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Is making the muslin. I have the coat back from the fitting. My model is a little bit camera shy. There really weren't that many adjustments. She needed extra at the hip, tapering to nothing at the waist. So I'm going to be giving her 2 inches around the hip. I won't give her any in the center back. I don't want it to wing out in the back. But the lengths that I adjusted worked out really well. Now, something that I know may not need repeating, but I'm going to say, as you can see here, you fit it with the shoulder pads that you intend to use in it. That way you can ensure that you're going to get a proper sleeve length. Otherwise, if you put the sleeve, if you set the sleeve length and then you put the shoulder pad in, it could be a little bit too short. So you can see here, I have marked the center front. And I will turn this over now and show you the adjustments that are needed on the back. As you can see, there is the center back seam. And I took a 1/2 inch out either side, and I'm going to take that 1/2 inch up parallel along the center back of the collar. This did 2 things for her. It actually accommodated for a little bit of roundness at the upper back. It also made the shoulders fit her better because the shoulders for her were a little bit too wide. So now I will show you the adjusted pattern, and then we will go and look at the rest of the pieces that we will have to adjust after we've adjusted the main pattern. So here we have the front and the back, and you can see here that I have adjusted the hips out. I decided to give her 3/4 of an inch. If it's a little bit too much, we can always fit that out when we try the finished garment on her. So I have adjusted the side panels. Next, I want to adjust the center back and the collar. You can see here, I've taken this off 5/8 to the neck seam and then tapered it down to where the crosswise mark is on the center back. So they're fairly straightforward and easy alterations. Next, I want to adjust the pattern. I will go off camera and adjust the pattern, bring it back, and outline what I've done. I find it's really helpful to alter all of the pieces relating to one side first and go on from the other. So what I started here is, this is the back piece. What I did, as you can see, is I marked out the stitching lines on the size that I'm going to be using. And the first thing I did was adjust the length. If you adjust the length, that's going to help. Then I like to work from top down. So I joined this is the back neck facing, this is the back lining, and I made the adjustment at the center back at the neck. And I didn't really add or subtract anything over here. This is going to be a pleat, it'll just take care of itself. But I took off the 5/8 of an inch at the center back. And here, as you can see, I folded out the length that I needed to fold out, and then working down the pattern, you can see at the hips, I added out the extra circumference at the hips so she would have enough room. Now, this is why you don't cut out all of the pattern pieces right on the cutting lines, because having extra paper around the pattern will make these alterations so much easier. So our back pieces are finished. Now, we'll go on to the fronts. Next, I'm adjusting the fronts. So what you can see here is, first thing you take care of is the length. So that is what I did on both the facing and the lining front. Then on the lining front, what I've done here, you probably can see this, is I've lined up all the cut edges so that I can just read through, and you can see here, that is the adjustment for the hips, read through from the body onto the lining. Doing this in a methodical fashion is going to make it so that you don't forget a piece. So next, we will deal with the collar. Now with the collar, as you can see, what we brought in here at the center back seam on the under collar, we're going to bring the same amount here for the upper collar, and that will be then cut on the fold. Now that we have the main bodice pieces done, let's look at the sleeves. And finally here, you can see that since we had to lengthen the sleeve on the body, we have to lengthen the sleeve on the lining. Now, just a little bit of information that's useful. If you want to find the elbow on a sleeve, the elbow is generally 10 inches up from the cuff. So that is the guide that I used on this particular pattern to find out where to lengthen the sleeve on the body and on the lining. The other pieces, obviously, we don't really have to adjust. Pocket pieces are pocket pieces, and the welt piece is the welt piece. So we have all of our pieces ready. Now, the next step, cutting. Okay, so questions?
I have some.
Yes. Go ahead.
I apologize. I have a few actually.
That's okay. Quite all right.
When we're doing the muslin, do you suggest having like 1.5 inch seam allowance in case we need to let it out?
It doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt at all.
Okay. And I tend to have an issue with narrow shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Is the sometimes I go down a size just to make that my standard.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so that's probably what I'll do then. Do you suggest tracing the pattern or using the cutout?
Well, that that I would leave up to you. The paper on this pattern is a nice paper. I'm not a big fan of tissue paper patterns. Generally, if I'm going to be using one of those, I will trace it off on something a little more robust. But this particular pattern is printed on a decent paper. So, I would leave that up to you.
And I've already gotten my pattern. Is there an update to that I should have gotten?
No, I don't think so, Rylas. It's because
okay.
Yeah, the kind of what she's doing is giving a little larger size range and tidying it up. I kind of gave her a rough and ready pattern to work with.
And just one other question.
Yeah.
How do you tell? I don't see any markings on the pattern. How do you tell which size is which on there?
Count.
Yeah, like look at the smallest one and look on the sizing chart and
okay, so just
and work out from there. I think, yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I want to make sure.
Okay, Una, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Kenneth. I live in Australia. I don't have much need for coats, but I'm doing this more for the tailoring aspects.
Okay.
So I'm curious as to where the coat should finish. Is it around the knee?
It is a little below the knee, yes.
A little below the knee. Thank you.
And see that, that is something that you could, if you wanted to make it a little shorter, a little longer, you could gauge that in your muslin.
Thank you.
Okay, so Faye, yes.
Yes, on the pattern, the waistlines, which is the size, the smallest size is the top line?
Yes.
The size, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so other questions?
And on the neck, these lines up here by the neck.
Yeah, those you just ignore. Those we're going to get rid of that in the new pattern. That was what I used as a guide to generate the facings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So this is Liz. My bust size is 1/2 inch larger than the size range on the pattern. Does that adjustment when should that come in your series of adjustments?
I would get the lengths first. And so then, so if you really need to add to it, with the intersection where the raglan, I would slash down from there and bring it out that way.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see. Who else? I saw another hand. Let's see.
Kenneth, what's this new pattern?
What's that?
What's the new pattern? I just bought a pattern a couple
it's the
weeks
same
ago.
as what you have. She just
Is it
tidied it.
larger? Is it larger sizing or the same thing but in color?
I think it's the same thing, but in color, pretty much.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, we didn't radically change it. We just tidied it up. That's my understanding. So okay, who questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, Becky.
Oh, did you say Becky?
Yeah.
I have my raglan shoulder pads. which way do they go? Like,
Let's see, there's
there's a thinner part and a thicker part. Does
the thinner part goes towards your neck. The thicker part goes towards the end of the shoulder.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not apparent on these things.
It wasn't to me. Thanks.
Okay, so let me see. I'm just looking at my notes again here. Raglan, because class videos. Collar, tops, down buttonhole, preparing the pocket, installing parts and pieces. One moment, please. Okay. Hemming and facing. Okay, so the next video is about cutting everything out. Do we want to kind of charge ahead and do that, or do we have enough for the evening? Charge ahead? Okay, so because cutting, marking, see, this is something my students at FIT, in their excitement about wanting to like get to the machine, the thing they tend not to do is to be very fastidious about their cutting and marking. And what I tell them is, you think you're going to get it later and you won't. And so so that is going to be what we're going to look at next. So cutting and marking. So here we are. And so again, I will just kind of ask, can everyone hear it?
Yep.
We good?
Cutting out the lining is fairly straightforward, and I generally like to cut the lining out first. What you have here is the center back piece and the front. You can see I'm cutting it out of a rather busy paisley. Now I'm using this rather busy paisley so I don't have to worry about matching a pattern, because matching a pattern on a raglan sleeve is a bit of a challenge. So I will cut these two pieces here, then lay out the sleeve and cut that. And now you can see I have the sleeve linings laid out. I will go off camera and cut those out, and you'll get to see the results. Now, before I continue, I would like to talk a moment about the cutting tools. I have the rotary cutter. I also have my Ganger shears. I like to spread my cutting out between the two. I don't use the shears or the rotary cutter exclusively. This way, I feel that you can avoid any repetitive stress injuries in your sewing. I think this is a really good consideration at this point. So be kind to your hands. Have multiple ways of cutting. This is the lining for the cuff latch. Now on the cuff latch, you either cut it along the grain or you cut it across the grain. That is up to you. I'll talk about that when we cut the one in face fabric. But I like to cut the lining on the bias. I find it's far easier to turn this right side out when you cut the lining on the bias. And this is the pocket bag. You could cut it out of the lining fabric. You could cut it out of pocketing. But we cut two of these because front and back, the way we set the welt pockets, this will create one whole pocket. So the straight grain is right here. And I will cut this out with my rotary cutter. Now on to marking. The first thing I want to mark is the shoulder dart on the lining sleeve. It's a pretty straightforward thing to do. You just use your tracing carbon and your tracing wheel. Now, debates rage about using the tracing carbon. Some people try to slip it between the layers, have the right sides out. I like the right sides together, so it's far easier to have one laying on the table facing up. Then you have the two layers of fabric. You have the carbon facing down, and then the pattern on top. That is the easy way to go. Now, another little marking thing here. This is what's called a dual tracing wheel. It's metric. We're not going to be using it for this, but they adjust, as you can see. You can adjust the widths. And then you put one finger here, one finger here. So you can have one tracing wheel on the stitching line, and then the other one will make the cutting line. Now, if you want to use one, don't just take this off and set it aside, because it will end up in the trash and you don't want to lose it. I just turn them like so. Now, my students, sometimes when they're shipped like this. So the students ask, okay, what's up with that? And I have to tell them, okay, you take them out and you turn them. So yes, now I like the ones with the blunt ribs as opposed to the needles. Doesn't damage the fabric so much. Okay. Shoulder, this is where we just come in with the scissors and make any snip we need to make. Allowances. And that's marking the sleeve. The only thing really to mark on the front is snips at the armhole. You can also mark a snip on the side to match it up. And I just will make a snip here where I fold it. So you can match this up to the back. Front is ready to go. Here is the lining back. So make one snip at the center back. And we make two snips. As a rule, two snips are on the back, one snip is on the front. One mark here and one mark here. These are the back pieces. We just want to know where this fold line is on the pocket. So it's a simple matter of two snips. Fairly easy. And the lining on the cuff latch, don't really need any marks. That will take care of itself. All of the marking and cutting done for the lining. Next will be the face fabric. This is the fabric that I'm going to be using for the demonstrator coat. This is a boucle. As you can see, it has a little metallic in it. So it's kind of pretty. But what you notice is that I have block fused it on the back. Now, this is not absolutely necessary, but what I wanted to do is to block fuse it so that you could tell the right side from the wrong side during the videos. So what I have done here is I have laid everything out. This is 3.5 yards of fabric at 54 inches wide. You notice I got a little bit left over, which is better, just in case you have a boo-boo. So let me unfold this and I'll show you the layout. What you see here, there's one of the sleeves, there's the other sleeve. This is the back. I'm orienting everything in one direction. This fabric, I'm not really sure whether it has a nap or not, but I've decided to orient everything in the same direction just so that there is no change of the surface texture when the garment is being worn. This is what's called a nap layout. The other option would be what's called a nested layout, where you turn all the pieces so that you can get a higher yield. That works for solid fabrics and tweeds and such, but for this particular fabric, I've decided to go with the nap layout. And here are the rest of the pieces. You have the undercollar piece cut on the bias. You have the upper collar cut center back on fold. This is the body front. This is the facing for the front. And then down here, I'm actually going to turn this. This is going to be the back neck facing. So these are the pieces that you cut from your face fabric. I will cut these out and then we will cover some marking. And one final piece. This is the cuff latch. And if you remember, we cut it on the bias in the lining. The straight of grain here, you can run it straight of grain, but I've decided to run it cross grain so that when it lays onto the sleeve, the texture will be the same. From here, we have our pieces of the face fabric. Next, we want to cut the tailoring canvas and the muslin. And finally, we cut the undercollar out of a thin muslin and out of tailoring canvas. I will go off camera, cut these two out, and bring you back the results. So here we are. We have the undercollar cut from the face fabric, the muslin, and now the canvas. As you can see, save this out with the pocket welt guide. You don't have to cut this out just yet, but keep these two together because you will need those later. All of our cutting is done. So to recap what we have done, we've cut out the lining pieces from the lining fabric. We've cut out the face fabric pieces from the face fabric. We've also cut the undercollar from muslin and tailoring canvas. And we've saved out the welt guide with the tailoring canvas. So we have all of our pieces cut, ready for marking. Now that we have everything cut out, aside from marking clips on the notches, there are a couple things that I want to mark. Placement and also center front and the button placement. Now, a little note here, what I've done, I've worked ahead, and since I altered this here, I needed to redistribute the spacing for the buttons. So that's what I would say is don't forget to do that. You could actually just wait until you have the buttonholes made, but you know, it's just good to look at it in the pattern. I like everything back to the pattern as best I can. So the first thing I want to do is make tailor tacks. Now, some people sew through the paper. I don't encourage that. So what you can see here, holes, and I've used the pilot punch from my buttonhole chisel. So I have a nice round hole. And I'm going to show you how I like to mark tailor tacks, which is maybe the same as you do it, maybe a little different, but I'd like to cover it here. This one at the edge because it's just a little easier to access for the video. What I want to do, I'm using, it's a Gutermann thread, Gutermann Mara 30. I like that because it has a little bit of heft to it. You can use really whatever basting thread you choose. I like to stitch down and then up right next to it. And then a little spacer. Makes it a little easier to make the loops consistent. You bring the needle back out. Notice we're not going through the paper, we're just going through the little hole. little easier if I'm not looking through the camera. Show you how this works. That out. And so then see, the nice thing is you can get this, you don't have to worry about tearing up your pattern. And ultimately, when you separate the fabric later, here, threads, here you have your tailor tacks. So now I will work ahead and mark all of the buttonholes and matching notches for the welt pocket and bring it back here because next we want to mark the center front line.
I have a question.
Tailor
Yes.
tacks in.
Question.
So you adjust the buttonholes depending on how much you've adjusted the length on the coat. You just spread that out evenly.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The next thing that we want to do. Now, some people stitch through the paper. This is a fairly easy thing to do. Paper on the center front. Then I'm going to show you. It's a variation of thread tracing. So with the thread tracing, we're going to be using the same Mara 30. I'm going to start a little above this buttonhole here. And the easiest way to remember it is stitch twice. Go along the cut edge of the paper. We make a stitch that lays flat. Loop. There's a different way I'll show you in a moment, but this is essentially what we're doing. One stitch is flat, one stitch creates the loop. What it looks like. You have flat, flat, loop, flat, loop. Now, there's another way if you're feeling very frisky and you can get two stitches in one pass. So this, we have the loop here, flat. Flat. This, watch very carefully. One stitch and another stitch. Long needle is going to be helpful. And then you leave the loop. So you have a loop and a flat all in one. Stitch. So it creates the same thing. So you can choose to do it the first way, which is a loop and a flat stitch, which is a little easier to remember. Or you could do it, you have your flat stitch here, one stitch which is going to create the loop, and the next stitch which is going to create the flat stitch. Two different ways of making the thread tracing. Yeah. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see. Here you have a loop and a flat stitch. I will continue off camera and finish the rest of this and bring it back to show you the results. Thread tracing sewn. How this works. It's kind of like magic.
Oh, so you can pull it. Oh, you've gone through 2 layers.
Isn't that cool?
Cut down the center. Now, this is a little memory trick. If you're working on a fabric that look the same. I have this fuse so you can tell back to front, but some fabrics is a little bit unclear. The face has the whiskers. So if you have a fabric where you can't tell front from back, you look for the whiskers. On the back, it's going to look like this on one side. It will look like this on the other side. But the whiskers, that's how I remember. The face has the whiskers. I will go and open the rest of this and bring it back and show you the result. All of our marking done. And when I put the pockets in, I will open up tailor tacks on the pocket. So we have our cutting. We have our marking done. Now we get to start construction. But before we start construction, I would like to recap marking. On the lining, aside from making the snips for the matching notches in seam allowances, really the only marking we want to do is the shoulder dart on the sleeve. On the main garment, you want to have tailor tacks for the buttonholes, tailor tacks for the pocket placement, and thread tracing for the center fronts. Make sure not to stint on marking. It will make your life so much easier later. So now, let's start making this coat.
Hang on. So, questions? Are your brains full yet? Laurel, yes.
Can you explain the advantage of tailor's tacks and thread tracing as opposed to any other method?
Well, you know, a lot of people, you know, tracing carbon is one that you see a lot. What I found with tracing carbon, depending on the fabric, the tracing gets kind of smudgy. And there are times you have to worry about, say, if you're working with a pastel color and you're working with tracing carbon, you have to worry about the bleed of the color of the tracing carbon getting on the fabric. I just find it stays longer.
Okay.
It's a lot longer lasting than any other method.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, other questions? Are your brains full?
I have a question.
Yeah, Faye, go ahead. And then Barbara, yeah.
Okay, on the thread tracing.
Yes.
Or thread, I've never seen it before, but it's very interesting. How big do you, or is the loops just a matter of whatever size you want? Just make them big.
Yeah. Okay.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good way to mark. I learned that from the old tailors at FIT.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Barbara, you had a question?
What did you fuse onto the green fabric?
It's called a fusible weft. And I, I'm lucky I'm here in New York, and it's called block fusing, where I took the fabric in, and they have a big machine that they kind of run it through. And so you can just have the entire yardage block fused. It's not absolutely necessary. I really did it because as we get into construction, I wanted you to be able to see the front side and the back side. So that's really why I did it.
Can we order that material somewhere and do it ourselves?
Like WayWack, the challenge with doing it yourself is getting it even.
Mhm.
And if you have like one of those presses, that could help you do it, or you could even divide your fabrics into sections so you could fuse it that way. A fusible weft, if you like WayWack or any of those like Bias Bespoke, I think probably has it. It's a fairly commonplace. You could use a fusible tricot if you wanted. I just used the fusible weft because basically that's what they had at the place that does the block fusing.
Are there some fabrics that you would rather use it with?
Anything, because see, I know this sounds like heresy. Lint and tweeds, that they make the French jackets out of. Some people would clutch their pearls if they heard me say block fuse a lint and tweed. But if you've ever worked with one, unless you have 2-inch wide seam allowances, you cut into it, the seam allowances just kind of burst. But if you have it block fused, it helps to control that. And the fabrics I would not recommend block fusing on are something with a very smooth finish, like a gabardine or a wool crepe or something like that, because if you hit it with any kind of steam, it could bubble. But the lint and tweeds and any of those kind of big heavy tweeds, anything with the texture, never going to see it. So that's
But doesn't it change the drape?
It does a little bit. So the thing is, I don't go with anything too heavy. So like a fusible weft is a good one, or a fusible tricot. So it'll change the hang just a little bit, but it won't make it stiff as a board. Yes, Faye.
Okay, if you do decide to fuse to the back of your fashion fabric, could you cut your pieces out first and then fuse it?
It depending on the fabric itself. And you don't necessarily need it for this particular coat, but if you choose to do it, you could get everything cut out first and fuse it. My concern about that would be that the manipulation, you could maybe distort something here or there, but you could do it that
way. Okay, thank you.
So Denise,
what about underlining with a silk organza?
You could do that
instead of fusing.
Yeah, like I said, I did the fusing just because I wanted everyone to be able to see front side, back side. It was more just for for instructional value than it was absolutely necessary, because this particular fabric was fairly stable. It stayed together fairly well. Okay, other questions? Yes, Meg.
Hey, am I in trouble if my fabric is a plaid?
No, you're just going to have to accept that. I would match center backs and try to have the plaid obviously running parallel, but you're going to have a little bit of a mismatch on the raglan lines. If you could match it, say, down on the sleeve, like below, say about 6 inches below the top of it, you should be fine. But
okay.
This is, it's like, don't go crazy. It'll never perfectly match.
Okay, good.
Okay,
thanks.
Okay, so other questions?
No question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. The thread tracing you did and you cut apart, I know you are more experienced and you do less manipulating of your fabrics than we do, but do those come out? Should I thread trace a straight line afterwards?
If you want
thread
to.
base.
Yeah, see, I will not push back on any kind of, if like a long thread based line, if you feel that's more secure, absolutely. Whatever it's going to
start coming apart on you when you just lose them.
I found, it tends and that's why I like that particular thread. It seems to hold to the fabric fairly well. But, again, if you're worried about it coming loose, follow it with the thread based and you'll be fine.
Okay. And one other
Okay.
question on the HIMO.
Yeah.
I don't have any, and I'm not driving into New York for that. The parking and the tolls is enough for me. I'm going to order the shoulder pads on that Bias Bespoke website you gave me, but I have like clueless of which HIMO to order. Does it make a difference?
Well, look at their canvases. They have one for about $10 a yard. That's
Okay.
the one you go.
Okay, fine.
You can pay like 20, $30, and then there's like one that's like $9.95 or something. That is plenty good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Denise, yeah.
You had mentioned early on that you didn't necessarily think we needed to like work with the lining pattern separately and but then when you showed the demo, it looked like you had taken the lining pattern and made your adjustments to it. And I was wondering, because I tend to not use a lining pattern, I just make the adjustments on my regular pattern.
Well, what I'm going to do next week, I'm going to start with, I have a video on, this is how I arrived at the pattern pieces for this particular coat, and it's formula. And so, because you see, there are different ways of getting a pattern. If you're draping, you kind of use the main body piece and you sort of wing it with the lining pieces. But with flat pattern, there's a formula that you use, and then everything fits together and everything favors correctly and all of that. And that's what I'm going to start the lesson out with next week, is how I got all of those pieces after, because when you draft a pattern, you start with the main body pieces, and then the facings and the linings don't magically appear. You have to generate them, and it really is formula. So that's going to be the first lesson next week, is you're going to see my formula, because I will take you through, I'll do it in half scale, which is kind of cute, but you'll get to see how I generate all those pieces. So if you have to make a lot of alterations to your coat, it's much better to just set aside all of the other pieces and then use the main body pieces and generate new pattern pieces that reflect the changes that you've made. Okay. So now Lexi, did I see Lexi here? Yes. Oh, well, hi, Libby.
Hi. Just two quick questions. One is, where is that size chart? Did I miss that? Where is that?
Rylis, is that part of the PDF file?
It should have been with the pattern, but
Okay.
I can go ahead and email her the size chart.
Okay, good.
Okay, thanks. And then Kenneth, do you think a Pendleton wool would be too stiff?
No.
Okay.
Now, is it like the regular Pendleton wool, or would it be like the blanket fabric?
No, it's just the regular one, and I have it, and it's beautiful, and I was thinking about using it, but I also like the tweed, so I just kind of was wondering.
You will be good. You'll be in good shape with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And so who else? Yes, Sybil.
How about a felted jacquard wool?
Oh, that would be beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And Yolanda, you had a question?
Actually, I was going to ask Rylis if she could email me the size chart. It didn't come with the pattern.
I'm sure she could.
If you could email all of us.
I will.
Okay, thank
Beautiful.
you. Rylis.
One last question on fabric.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
I had emailed you because I wanted to do something fluffy, and you said just something smooth. I don't have a tweed. I went and treated myself to a good piece of cashmere. Will you work with me with that, or do I have to go get something else?
Yeah, because as I remember, it had a nap to it, which is
A little
going to be
bit.
a little bit problematic for this. But a cashmere would be a good candidate for this. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. I want it to be really nice, being them working along with you. I'll make it worth my while. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So now, Lexi, did you have a question?
I do. I got a pair of the raglan shoulder pads from By Bespoke, and
yeah.
it truly looks like they're two of the same side. There's
are.
two notches on the back of both of them. But when I called them to see if that was the case, they said no, it's a pair, but it truly looks like they both belong on the same shoulder. So does that happen?
That's pretty common. Yeah,
Okay.
so
Not a big deal.
Yeah, because when I buy them, I just pull two out of the box, and they
Okay.
tend to look at the same.
Okay,
Okay.
great. And then
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to ask one last question. How offended would you be if we altered the collar a bit?
I would not be offended at all. This is your
Yeah.
coat. If you like a different line on the collar, then by all means. See, patterns are printed on paper, not carved in stone. And so the pattern is really the starting point. And so since you are the designer here, you're choosing the fabric, you're making the alterations. If you don't like the line of the collar, then absolutely change it.
Okay, thanks. I just didn't want to offend you.
Oh, no, no, good heavens, no, no. I would be sad if you didn't have a coat you were happy with because you didn't want to offend me. So alter away. Okay, so other questions? Yes, Faye.
Okay. I have a problem with sleeves and jackets. I always have like a ripple come down, like right here.
Mhm.
How do you get rid of that?
Okay, now see, this is where
Is that
Photoshop.
a-
See, Photoshop has created an unrealistic idea of what proper fit is. Now on a raglan, see the generally on a raglan, the pitch of the sleeve is about a 45-degree to the torso. So if you were to bring your arm up 45 degrees, you would get rid of that.
Okay.
You see, there's a thing about there's mobility and appearance, and there are times if you have it fitted so that it's all completely smooth right in there, then what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to get your arm up.
Okay.
And so, there is a thing called overfitting, and I had to explain it once to a friend of mine. Mae West in her movies. Now we all know who Mae West is, right? Because my students at FIT, they're like, I don't know, because they're young. Mae West had two dresses. There was one for the long shot. It was sausage in a casing. There was absolutely no wearing ease. It was skin tight. She could not bend. She could not walk, really. They had like a board with armrests on it. And she wanted to rest. They would kind of like lean her back on this board.
God.
No wearing ease. But, she looked great. And then they had the other dress that she could move and sit and do what she needed to do. You don't want to be Mae West in the sausage in a casing. So, you have to kind of accept that, okay, for something like this, you're going to have a little bit of a drag line there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Laurel.
Just a quick question on the buttons. I would, my preference is to have fewer buttons, but maybe have them be a little bigger.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter in this case, how many you choose?
What I would do, because the overlap is based on a 1-inch button. So the distance from the center front to the finished edge, you might widen that a little bit if you're going to make your buttons a larger diameter.
Okay.
The general rule, the formula for to figure the overlap is the button diameter plus 1/8 of an inch. So that would be the distance from the center front to the seam. So if you're going to go with a larger diameter button, you would widen your overlap slightly.
Can you say that? Could you give that formula again? It's button diameter plus what?
Button diameter plus 1/8 of an inch, or if it's metric, it's 3 millimeters.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What if your button's not round?
I would go with the widest side of the button, because you're going to have to make the buttonhole large enough to get the button through. So I think the thing would be experiment with how long that buttonhole is going to be, because the buttonhole also is the button diameter plus 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
So the buttonhole length equals the overlap depth. Button diameter plus 1/8 of an inch. It's just a round number, because there are just some good general rules to just keep in your head when you're working.
Okay, thank you.
Kenneth, do you
Yes, sir.
Do you use a smaller button on the cuff latch than on the front?
Yes.
So, maybe like a 3/4 inch or?
Yeah, 5/8 or 3/4. As you can kind of play with that. But yes. Okay, other questions? Yes, Becky.
I thought you had said the distance from the cut edge on the front to the center front was 1 3/8 of an inch.
Right, that's factoring in the overlap and a 1/2 inch seam allowance.
So a 1/2 inch would be the seam allowance.
So I think we're using a 7/8 inch button or something like that. But I just know that
Oh.
on the pad. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Because see,
Gotcha.
when you're placing a buttonhole, the center front comes up like this. The end of the buttonhole extends past by 1/8 of an inch in the
Okay.
pattern. That's what that's about. Did that answer
So
your
with
question?
with a 1-inch button, you still would want.
It would be it with a 1-inch button. You would want 1 1/8 inches between the center front and the stitching line, and then you add in your seam allowance.
Well, wouldn't that be 1 5/8 inch
Well, but
from the current one?
you're bringing in the end of the button a little further. You could go with a 7/8 inch button if you want.
Okay. I
Okay.
just, okay.
Okay, so other questions? Okay.
Oh,
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
fabric choice.
Yes.
I purchased a poly ultra suede from Metro Textiles.
Mhm.
Do you think that is a good choice?
I would, what I would do, I would make a couple test seams and see how it sews.
Okay.
But, I think you could probably make a good coat out of that. Absolutely. Now there's like the pad, because we're going to be doing pad stitching on the undercollar. That might show a little bit, but if you keep the collar down all the time, that won't matter.
I see. Okay.
Okay then. So other
What
questions?
do we do for next week?
Next week. Well, what I would
try
say
to do
is,
for next week.
okay, your homework next week would be looking at your pattern, taking your measurements, seeing if you can make some of the adjustments yourself. You could start emailing me and we could start setting up some office hours if anyone is so inclined. And because next week then, like I said, we're going to start with the generating all the different pieces from the pattern. So, so if you don't have everything adjusted and ready to cut out and everything by next week, that is not going to be catastrophic. Because like I said, you can take this at your own pace.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Okay
you.
then, folks. So I think our work is done here. Oh, Libby, you had another question? Nope, you're just saying goodbye. Okay. So yes,
Thank
so
you.
yeah, so I think our work is done for today. And so I'm just going to hang around for a couple more minutes. But if if you have to go somewhere else and do some other things, I will not take offense if you sign off. So I will see you same time next week.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect.
Kenneth, if I want to change the front of the jacket of the coat to like a fly
Okay.
front, are you okay with
not
it?
for this
I know
class.
you don't want to do it in the class, but would you just help
You
me change
absolutely
the pattern?
could. Yeah, you absolutely could. It's going to be a little bit tricky to do kind of what I would recommend if you want to know how to do a fly front coat. I have a craftsy class.
I know,
called
but I never got to watch it. I know.
But the
Okay.
pattern making is there, and the making of the fly front is there. So that
Yeah, right.
I would that would be
Oh,
I think
just to adapt the drafting of one of the
like I
pattern
said,
for that,
like
I can take your time, your 1 hour for that?
yeah, if you go and look at that class, because there's a whole thing about the pattern making, how you get the pattern for this, and
Oh,
then
okay.
instruction. So
I'll look at that and then I'll get back to you. Okay.
Okay, very good.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, question.
Okay. I have my muslin sewn, and like I said earlier, I had to add to the front and to the back. But what you did was how I normally do it, just go out the sides. And Becky is my sewing buddy. So, so we get together. And so which is actually the better way of doing it?
For this particular gal, she's very narrow in the shoulders and she had fuller hips. And so for her, everything up here, once I did this pinch back there to get the shoulders where I wanted them, I just added it at the side.
Okay, because I'm narrow at the shoulders, but I have from my waist down, I'm like a straight line, but it does. I look like a triangle.
Okay.
you know, best way
You
to
know,
put it.
what I would say is add it at the sides and see how it looks.
Okay,
Because this is, you know, this is a fairly, it has a bit of a flair, this coat. So give that a try.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, then. Rylas, question.
One more question on that HIMO interfacing that you said you found for about $10 a yard. What was the
Yeah.
company you bought it from?
The Bias Bespoke.
Bias?
Yeah, they have all sorts. It's a very good resource. You could probably get it at B Black in Los Angeles as well. But Bias Bespoke, they have several grades of it, but this one is like $9 or something. It's nice, $9.90 something, whatever, about $10 a yard. It's a good, it's a good one to have.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, folks. Take care.
All righty.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.